Alrighty, looks like we are recording. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce Mr. Darin Figurskey, who is the Operations Branch Chief at the Ocean Prediction Center. Darin, the proverbial and virtual floor is all yours.
Brian, thank you very much. And thanks to everybody for taking a part of your day to spend it with Brian and I today to learn more about the Ocean Prediction Center. Soon, I think it's actually tomorrow, there'll be another version of this, learning about the National Hurricane Center's Tropical Analysis Forecast Branch that does forecasting over the tropical Atlantic, part of the tropical Pacific. But today you get the Ocean Prediction Center. On behalf of our director, AJ Rice, and myself, again, I'm glad to be here with you today. I'll be able to be here for about another 49, maybe 50 minutes or so. At the top of the hour, I do have another meeting I'm leading I have to get to, but we'll have time for questions, and I'll go through the slides. And please, again, if you have questions, I'll go ahead and put some of those in the chat. We'll get to as many of those as we can. Some of those, if there are many of them, we'll have to answer later on. And I got to make sure I'm able to use the technology correctly. So let's go to the next slide. So the Ocean Prediction Center is part of the National Centers for Environmental Prediction. And in those centers, there's actually, well, there's 9. NCEP Central Operations is kind of moving out and being reorganized a little bit under our Weather Service headquarters. So maybe right now there's technically 8, but we fall under the National Centers for Environmental Prediction. Our home is here in College Park, Maryland. There are other centers located across the country specializing in a number of different things, from space weather to aviation weather to hurricanes to tornadoes to the climate. Our Environmental Modeling Center helps to research and perfect the models that are run to help make our forecasts. The Weather Prediction Center, also here in College Park, they do a lot of rainfall forecasting, surface analyses, long-range forecasting, and other support of our 122, I believe, Weather Service forecast offices around the entire nation. The Ocean Prediction Center, as well as the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch, has areas it's forecast for in the Atlantic and in the Pacific, and the Ocean Prediction Center does a little bit in the Arctic. Focusing on the Atlantic, the area in the blue is the area done by the Ocean Prediction Center. The hatched areas off the coast of the US in the blue, those are the offshore forecasts with the zones that we provide in those offshore forecasts. The high seas, where we're the authoritative voice for those high seas forecasts, those are done out to 35 west in the Atlantic Ocean. TAFB does the area to the south. You can see in the green, even though the high seas forecast for our authoritative warnings and advisories on the high seas only go out to 35 west, as you'll see a little bit later on, our radio fax products go all the way out in the Atlantic to Western Europe. On the Pacific side, same kind of thing. In blue is the area done by the Ocean Prediction Center, mainly north of 30 north. On the Atlantic side is 31 north, basically I think it's the Florida-Georgia border, but 30 north in the Pacific. The green area, again, is the area covered by the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch, or TAFB, at the Hurricane Center. You'll see in this image a purple, and the purple is the area covered for high seas forecasting, offshore forecasting by the Weather Service Forecast Office in Honolulu, Hawaii. In this case, we also see areas covered by the Alaska office, their coastal areas noted there around the state of Alaska. And ours high seas will actually go over top of their area there in Alaska to cover the area, particularly near the Bering Strait and in the Gulf of Alaska. All of our forecasts for the high seas are part of WMO Met Areas. The World Meteorological Organization has the world and its marine areas divided up in these meteorological areas, in which the nations responsible for them, noted here on the screen, provide those high seas forecasts. If you just did a search online for WMO Met Areas or WMO Met Areas high seas forecast, you'll find all of the high seas forecasts issued by these national meteorological and hydrological services around the world. For the United States, we are responsible for Met Areas 4 and 12, 4 being over the Atlantic, 12 being over the Pacific. And you'll note that even though our radio fax charts go all the way out to, in the case of the Pacific, all the way out to Eastern Asia, and the Atlantic, all the way out to Western Europe, we do overlap a little bit with the UK's Met area, with France's Met area, Japan's and Russia's. We don't necessarily coordinate a lot with them, coordinate a little bit more with Canada since they're really close by. But customers over the years have liked the service we provided, at least for the radio fax charts going all the way out there, and getting a sense of the systems that may kind of start to encroach on from one med area going into the other. So again, we're the authoritative voice for med areas 4 and 12, and you can see the other med areas around the world in this image. Why we do what we do, partly because over the Atlantic and the Pacific, on average in the area that the Ocean Prediction Center services, there are about 80 plus or minus hurricane force extratropical lows that occur each season in those basins. And that's not to mention all the storm force lows, as well as all the gale force lows which are many more of those. And on average at the Ocean Prediction Center, we probably have about 5 figures in terms of the number of warnings for gales, storm force conditions, hurricane force conditions, by the way, freezing spray conditions, but particularly this time of year for the North Atlantic and the North Pacific and a little bit of the Arctic. This trend line here, this is from the 23 to 2024 season over the North Atlantic. I don't have a similar graphic for the North Pacific right now, but the red line is the trend line. And then the blue line is the normal line. And you can see starting in about late August and early September of 2023 through about the holidays going from 2023 to 2024, in fact, maybe even going to February of 2024, the pace of hurricane force issuances of warnings were much higher than the normal. And then things really slowed down from about early to mid-February on. We only had maybe a handful more. So I guess the season as a whole ended up for the hurricane force issuances over the North Atlantic just a little bit below normal. This year has been very, very busy, particularly over the Pacific. And usually the Pacific and the Atlantic really start up pretty quickly. We're really busy through the holidays into January to early February. And then things do start to slow down. In the Atlantic, some areas that we worry about for hurricane force lows, certainly north of Newfoundland, northeast of Newfoundland and toward Greenland. And out over the Pacific, in the Great Circle routes, coming up from north of Japan off of the Kuroshio Current, and then through areas of the Bering Sea, the Aleutians, and then toward the Pacific Northwest. This is another example of why we do what we do. And all of the products that we issue, it is our hope that the mariners or people that are serving the mariners with routing or whatever help the mariner avoid the bad stuff. And this is an example of avoidance from Hurricane Milton. This was just, the hurricane that impacted Florida just a couple, 3 months ago, whatever it was, back in early October. So really just over a couple months ago from when we're talking right now. And through looking at like a marine traffic website, this is courtesy of a Department of Defense software called SeaVision, which we pay for, but it helps us to understand where vessels are, helps us understand kind of the social science of what vessels are doing, how they're avoiding big systems. You can see in this case that the ships, which are denoted by the triangles on the screen, are largely, if not all, completely away from where Milton was, denoted by the circles there, getting ready to impact Florida. And this is a good news story. We want to make sure that in as much as possible, we get enough advance warning out to the mariner so that he or she is able to avoid the stuff by going slower, going faster, maybe changing a route. We want to make sure that people are safe, that vessels and cargo are safe, and we understand the time pressures of leaving a port, having to get into a port, making sure you get the cargo released on time, getting the new cargo on time, and getting ready to get to that next destination. And so we understand the pressures, but at the same time, we really want people to be safe. And this is a reason why we do what we do. In this instance, obviously, a lot of people heeded the warnings and stayed out of harm's way. This is another example, extratropical cyclone that actually occurred moving into the Gulf of Alaska. This is back at the end of September. On the kind of the middle lower left, there's a 96-hour surface forecast of a developing hurricane force low pressure system that was right about 50 north and moving to the northeast into the Gulf of Alaska in the next 3 to 4 days. The actual forecast a little bit later on showed hurricane force conditions in the Gulf of Alaska going out 96 hours. On the left is a satellite image, a scatterometer image, where satellites can actually sense wind direction and speed. And the hotter the colors, the stronger the winds. In this case, the bright reds in the southern Gulf of Alaska indeed note hurricane force winds associated with that low that you can see kind of with the the circular feature in the center of that circular feature. I'll call it the eye in this case, but it's really the center of low pressure. It was over the Gulf of Alaska at that time. So the hurricane force system did verify. But looking at sea vision once again in the upper right, while not as completely void of vessels as in the previous image with Milton, there's still a large void area that we noticed there. And again, that's a good thing. That's what we want to make sure that people do, is avoiding the really bad winds, the dangerous seas associated with significant storm systems. This is an example, maybe not such a good news story. This is from Ernesto. This is from August, mid-August, in this case, August 16th of 2024, where Ernesto was just off the coast of the southeast coast and the Carolina coast of the US. It's a little bit of a fuzzy image, but this is a capture of a visible satellite image. And the green image, the green kind of X and the home thing there on the visible image superimposed on that is actually the location of a vessel that tried to get around the north side of Ernesto. I believe that, it's hard to say exactly for sure. We tried to contact the vessel first to find out there was okay, and then to try to find out what products were being used to make decisions. But what we can surmise is that the ship probably thought it could get out north of Ernesto, get out in front of it, and then get closer to port, get out ahead of it. Probably what likely happened was increase in winds and increased seas as Ernesto came north, slowed down the ship and continued to slow down the ship such that it was very, very close to the eye of the storm and into very, very strong winds. And looking at some of the sea vision software, this ship was pushed actually some 40 miles to the north before Ernesto finally got far enough north where the ship could start to make its way again to the south and southeast. This vessel actually had a documented ship visit by members of our Port Meteorological Officer program, which is also part of our voluntary observing ship scheme. And the ship, I think at the time, declined to participate in the VOS program. We need observations. Observations are very important to us. We hope that vessels out there that are willing to participate in VOS can, because the observations are important, not just to us as forecasters, but for situational awareness for people actually on board the vessel. And if you don't believe me, believe the National Transportation Safety Board, who put out this report following the El Faro sinking back in the mid-2000s, which noted in the text of the report that ships providing a continuous stream of real-time marine data would enhance both awareness of current conditions and forecasting. So being a part of the observational network certainly can help us as forecasters, can also help people who are in transit, just again, to keep more cognizant of what weather conditions are. Globally, there's not a lot of observations that are being taken. And even where you see the blue areas where you think, wow, that's a lot of observations. Well, in those grid points, that could be as few as, with the blue, 26 per month, or maybe one per day in some of those areas. So we really need observations, even where observations are being taken more than other parts of the global ocean. Weather is dynamic and weather can change. And so the more observations that we have, the better off we all are in providing more accurate warnings, more accurate computer models, better situational awareness for the forecasters, and in some cases, allowing the forecasters to be able to update their warnings. And this is an example here. This is going back to 2015. Nova Scotia is off to the upper left of the screen. This is a vessel observation that had a northwest wind of 65 knots, hurricane force, near low pressure. And I superimposed the L on this because it's near that kind of comma-shaped cloud feature where the actual center of the low was. Getting this report, actually one of our forecasters here at the Ocean Prediction Center was able to upgrade a storm warning to a hurricane force wind warning. Now, there wasn't any lead time for the vessel that was right there, but nevertheless, all these other green dots that are out there, observations and showing locations from ships, those vessels likely did benefit from that. So there was a societal benefit from getting that warning updated. So the ship wasn't there, we wouldn't have known about it. Coming back into more recently, this is an example over the Gulf of Alaska. On September 12th of 2024. I was actually forecasting this day, and we had strong gale force conditions forecast over the northern Gulf of Alaska. But lo and behold, in looking at things, there were a couple of observations that were reporting storm force conditions. And that's not that unusual, as you get the winds kind of pinching up along the continent there, especially near the coast of Alaska. And so there were a couple of observations. The blue one is actually from a cruise ship that tends to frequent the area, and in contacting the forecasters at the Anchorage office, they said, yeah, that's probably a pretty good observation. This ship reports a lot, and you can trust that one. So seeing that 60-knot wind and another report of 50 knots not too far away from that from the east, upgrade that gale warning to a storm warning. Again, getting the word out there. Could have been short lead time, but people knew about it, at least with a little bit advanced warning, probably in some cases, and I'm sure it made a difference. If those ships weren't there, we wouldn't have known. So again, observations are vital if you can take them. What we do. So at the Ocean Prediction Center, we have over 150 products that we provide each day. We have graphics that we provide, surface analyses and forecasts going out 96 hours, actually out to 120 hours of their hazards, 500 millibar charts that are automated, wind wave charts that we produce for the Atlantic and the Pacific and a little bit of the Arctic, automated wave period and direction charts, as well as our alphanumeric products, offshore forecasts, and then products that we begin as alphanumerics, but then are retransmitted by the Coast Guard at various frequencies, our NAVTEX, our high frequency voice broadcasts for offshore waters of the VOBRA. Then we also have the high seas forecasts that are available via satellite communications, like via Inmarsat and Iridium, and those are required by the Safety of Life at Sea Convention. We make sure that those get out 4 times a day, updated as needed for a valid period of 48 hours. In addition, at the Ocean Prediction Center, the NOAA component of the U.S. National Ice Center is part of the Ocean Prediction Center. They're located actually in Suitland, Maryland, in a tri-agency facility, which is also comprised of the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard, 2 core partners of the National Weather Service. And the National Ice Center provides snow and ice products. They do snow and ice analyses during this time of year as ice starts to build up, for example, over the Great Lakes. They'll provide information on ice buildup and ice quantity out there. They'll also provide decision support services for people like the Coast Guard who want to make sure that transits over the Great Lakes are done safely and where they can. If it's really cold enough, they'll actually provide ice services as far south as the Chesapeake Bay. Last year was just a little bit of that in inlets, but it's been a while since it's been cold enough where they had to think to do widespread ice services over the Chesapeake Bay. But nevertheless, they're able to do that. Website there, usicecenter.gov, for all of their products and services. And here's just some example of some of the products they do, not just over the northern latitudes, but also I'll call it the high latitudes of the south. They'll do Antarctic ice services, monitoring iceberg calving and so on. And there are web products on the Ocean Prediction Center's webpage, taking some of the U.S. National Ice Center's products and services, or products from the International Ice Patrol and others who are able to share where the icebergs are, where they're going, their concentration. That information is available to the mariner there. So in addition to what we do, in addition to the radio fax services that we provide and the other alphanumerics and the things broadcast by the U.S. Coast Guard, we provide a digital forecast, much more specific forecast, through our National Digital Forecast Database. Right now at the Ocean Prediction Center, we basically do that about 250 miles offshore, essentially about the EEZs. And you can see the map of the rest of the oceanic domain there. Full basin products and services are provided by the Hurricane Center's Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch, as well as by the WFO Honolulu office, and there are digital forecast services provided by the offices in Alaska. We're working toward here at the Ocean Prediction Center a full basin capability ourselves to cover those gaps in the North Atlantic and the North Pacific. But if you go to digital.weather.gov, you'll get the full suite of the products and services available from the National Digital Forecast Database. Certainly, if you click on the oceanic domain, you'll get the hazards, the winds, the wind gusts, the wave forecast, all that available to you there. From that National Digital Forecast Database, on the right side of the screen, you can see products that we can derive from that to provide decision support services much more easily to our core partners. And in this case, this is from November 18th of 2024, there was an example of a hurricane force low that was staying just offshore of the northwest coast of the United States, but really providing some adverse weather, not just for mariners, but for people inland with heavy rain and really gusty winds and high terrain. And there were probably a lot of news reports as a result of this storm, I think one to follow. But from our National Digital Forecast Database, we were able to provide graphics like this to critical decision makers like the Coast Guard, so they could easily understand what the impacts of weather are going to be, where they're going to be, and then they can actually share this with people who they want to share the information with that they tend to serve. And here's an example of one of these decision support briefings that we provide for the Coast Guard. This is just one slide, but it shows hurricane force low, in this case, off of the southeast coast of the US on November the 15th. And in this, we have the key messages where we talk about, okay, what's causing it, in this case, low pressure system, what's expected and when, and then kind of the highlight of what's the worst conditions, and then when are things going to improve. You know, we think that, you know, people are really interested in, from a critical decision-making standpoint, when conditions are going to begin, you know, when they're going to be at their highest and where that's going to be, and also when they're going to start to subside, so they can make the best planning possible. And while we can't put every detail of the system in these short briefings, this enables people with some knowledge to go to the right place in the forecast to be able to find the information that they need, more detail, to be able to, again, further make confidence in the critical decisions that they're trying to make. If you're interested in subscribing to these briefings, the U.S. Coast Guard does provide these via Gov delivery. And that's up to the Coast Guard. Through the public-private partnership, we're able to provide specialized services to people like emergency managers. And in this case, the Coast Guard acts like an emergency manager, and they take our information. The Coast Guard understands where the impacts are, and they're well within their rights to be able to provide that to whomever they want to. And in this case, they provide it via the site Gov Delivery. So it's a long website, but through that website here on the screen, you'll be able to subscribe to that if you like. All you got to do is go to the website, enter an email address, click submit, and you're going to get those briefings. Here at the Ocean Prediction Center, we do them once a week, every Wednesday, and then we update them as needed. So for example, there's a pretty strong system that's going off the Pacific coast in the next couple of days. I did an updated briefing from yesterday's for today's, did a briefing for that, looking out to the next couple of days. We also did updated briefing on the Atlantic side yesterday for some storm force conditions over there with strong winds off the mid-Atlantic and particularly off the New England coast. So again, if you're interested, please subscribe to that. Other decision support services under the Ocean Prediction Center, and this one is also at the same time through the auspices of the U.S. National Ice Center, tactical support. On the left side, I already mentioned support for the U.S. Coast Guard in trying to make sure people can get through icing conditions where they need to be, especially when it's getting to freeze up or get really cold over Lake Superior. Also, you know, Lakes Michigan, Huron, Erie, even Ontario. On the right side, this was some sub-seasonal to seasonal support for voyage planning off the Antarctic continent. Cutters are very interested in finding out, you know, when can they get through? When might they have to do services down there for strategic assets and the like? We also have to be concerned about the areas like the Northern Passage. Are they going to open up more? It might never be ice-free, even though we think areas are going to be ice-free, because there still might be small icebergs or bergy bits up there. So there still can be dangers, and we want to make sure people are aware of those. So the U.S. National Ice Center is poised to provide decision support to people like the Coast Guard, who then in turn can help support, you know, those who are planning voyages up there or making sure they're going to do those safely, because in northern latitudes, way up there, where are the ports? Where are the emergency services going to come from? It's going to take a long time to get support if something bad happens. So we want to make sure that people are able to plan accordingly and make voyages safely. And I bring up this again here in this image here, even though a lot of it might have been, this is north of the Alaskan coast, it might be considered quote unquote ice-free. Maybe the ice edge is creeping north, but there's still a lot of bergy water up there. And bergy water is defined as navigable water that contains icebergs. And so we want to make sure that there aren't any tragedies there, people are safe. And to the right is an animation of the collapse of Canada's Milne ice shelf in 2021. Our U.S. National Ice Center is monitoring this all the time. And there's a kind of a really compelling video of that there on the right. I'll let that loop through one more time and go on to the next slide. So with that, how do we do what we do? Well, everything starts with observations, not just from what we can get from buoys and ships and the like, but also, what we get from satellite. And I've already talked a little bit about satellite imagery, but I'll mention it again. On the left side is a scatterometer data, where a satellite can actually assess the wind speed and direction out over, an area like the open ocean. And the hotter the colors, the stronger the winds. And in this case, on the left side is image that was taken actually back on November 20th, hurricane force conditions right off the northwest coast of the US. And you can see right under the low, the eye in this case, but right under the center of the low to the south, you see some red flags denoting hurricane force winds as predicted, as forecast, as shown on that very low pressure system of 944 millibars that was off the coast. I think its lowest pressure was observed by the Weather Prediction Center to 942, which is one of the lowest, if not, the lowest that's been observed off the Pacific coast during that time of year. Other conditions that we see around the browns are storm force conditions. As we get to the lighter browns, that's strong gale, the yellows are gale. And those help us understand what's going on weather-wise, from which then we're able to produce our surface charts. In this case, here's a surface analysis. This is something that's produced in a 4-agency way, clipped together from work by our forecasters and surface analysts at the Ocean Prediction Center, the National Hurricane Center, the Weather Prediction Center, and WFO Honolulu, Hawaii. And they show, in this case, the salient features of low pressure systems, high pressure systems, the fronts, the isobars, and the hazards in this case associated with each low as it applies. And so in this case, you see a couple of gale force lows out over the Western Pacific along a strung out cold front, another gale force low to the south of Japan, and then again, the more notable hurricane force low off the coast of the United States. We make these surface analyses, we provide them to the customer via radio, fax, and FTP mail, and then we'll also look at other observations like wave conditions. And here's an altimeter pass, also from November the 20th, showing around that low pressure system some pretty significant waves, actually upwards of near 40 feet. There's a 37.6 just due west, about 50 north there, due west of the Canadian-US border near Washington State, and some other 30s just to the south of that. And so some really significant waves that helps us produce wind and wave charts, that helps us understand how the models are handling current conditions. And then with our assessment of current conditions and being situationally aware of what's going on as much as we can right now through the buoy observations, through the satellite observations, through radar near the coast where it's available, we're able to then start to utilize the model data and try to characterize, what's going to happen in the next 7 days based on, okay, which model is handling the current conditions the best, maybe which one has the best track record of things going on in the not too distant past and actually the current time, and then we'll tend to follow that out. Normally in the near term guidance, like from our weather services, a global forecast system, and the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, or ECMWF, tend to be really, really close. In the near term, there's usually not that much different. As you get out maybe to 3 and 4 days and beyond, things can start to be a little bit different though. And so then which one do you want to follow? Again, using the same reasoning I mentioned before, closest to the observations, best track record recently, and so on, will tend to follow that particular model guidance. And we'll look at a number of different fields. This is surface pressure showing, in this case, back in November 2022, sprawling high pressure off the east coast of the United States, and also then a pretty good low pressure system over Florida, and but then other low pressure to the north over eastern Canada, and then real strong low pressure off the map, probably toward Greenland. From this, we'll look at other model fields, not just surface pressure. We'll look at the winds, we'll look at the waves. We might look at other sophisticated model parameters, such as vorticity or upward vertical motion. Sometimes we'll look at instability parameters. We'll also look at winds aloft. We'll look at a host of things in as much as we have time for to make sure we can get the good forecast out and get the forecast out on time, and then produce them in the number of ways I've already described. Again, 150 products each day. I hate to say it's like an assembly line, but it is kind of like an assembly line. The production is constant, and we need to make sure we try to meet deadline as much as possible, because if we miss a radiofax deadline, it is not going to come back to us. Once it's missed, it's either old product that goes out or no product that goes out, and we want to avoid that certainly in as much as possible. In partnership with the U.S. Coast Guard, there is the radiofax broadcast, which you can find the schedule if you just do a search on, I'll go back, if you just do a search on worldwide radiofax or worldwide RFAX, you can find the schedule here. Last updated probably in late 2022. It's pretty current, and it provides the entire schedule, not just of radiofax charts done by the U.S., but radiofax products and services done by the other services around the world that still do things via radiofax. In addition to the radiofax that's disseminated by the U.S. Coast Guard, I've mentioned some of the other high frequency, very high frequency products that are done by us alphanumerically and then sent out by the Coast Guard via broadcast communication. They really help us out a lot with that. In the Weather Service, we disseminate products and services over NOAA Weather Radio. NOAA Weather Radio is more line of sight, so some of the coastal forecasts will be on there. Some of our offshore forecasts may make it on there. It gets a little ways off of the coast, but all those NOAA Weather Radio stations are inland, so they go a little ways off the coast, but we won't be producing high seas forecasts, for example, over Weather Radio. Those are generally done for inland forecasts, near coastal, near offshore areas, and certainly warnings such as special marine warnings will be done and sent out over NOAA Weather Radio. Other services we provide, obviously there's a lot of information on the internet, and then FTP mail. You can get weather service charts, text information in a low bandwidth way using that service. And there are other things here, all of which you can find on a webpage from our National Weather Service Marine Programs headquarters site, which I'll show in a moment. Just want to note that a lot of our products and services, particularly our high seas and our NAVTEX, are all part of GMDSS, the Global Maritime Distress and Safety Services, and the GMDSS safety system, which provides maritime safety information to the mariner. And so we are the authoritative voice, if I didn't mention that before, for the high seas warnings and advisories out over med areas 4 and 12. And we're also required to participate in WMO's VOS program, which again, I'll emphasize here, if you're interested in joining that, that can be very helpful to us. This is our Marine Programs webpage here, weather.gov/marine, or I should say www.weather.gov/marine. And forgive me for my crude circle at the top drawn by my mouse, but you can find marine text forecasts, radiofax charts, how we disseminate things in other ways, either directly from the National Weather Service or in partnership with the U.S. Coast Guard. You can find out getting products via email like FTP mail and so on. And not only can you link to our Ocean Prediction Center, National Hurricane Centers, CPHC, which also houses WFO Honolulu, their products and services, but you can get products and services linked here from all of the coastal offices along the Pacific coast, the Atlantic coast, the Gulf Coast, by Alaska, as well as in the Great Lakes from this site. And I mentioned the Great Lakes here because we have a Great Lakes portal. If you go to www.weather.gov/Great Lakes, there's a kind of a one-stop shop, if you will, for some of the products and services, routine products and services, particularly hazards, that you can get over the Great Lakes. And go into this site, you can get text products generated for you, but you can also get in a graphical way highlights really quickly of where some of the hazards may be. And you can actually generate for yourself if you're only interested in wave height, or if you're interested in a combination of wave height and wind speed. You can select those things and get that information for you directly, again, on the website. You can also find text forecasts at the site, forecast discussions there. A lot of good information if you're going to be traversing the Great Lakes, you can find at this portal. One of the changes that we've made, I think from the last time we did a Blue Water Mariners presentation, we have expanded our 24-hour forecast. It used to be from the Ocean Prediction Center that our 24-hour forecast for the wind waves as well as surface charts were, I'll call them little thumbnails, or they were similar to our digital forecast, basically done just off the EEZs, a little bit further out, about the 65 West. That was predicated upon workflows, but in conjunction with our bargaining unit here at the Ocean Prediction Center, and being able to gain efficiency some other ways, we were able to expand our 24-hour footprint across the Atlantic as well as the North Pacific to be able to provide the same level of service at this time period as we're able to provide at the 48, 72, and 96-hour periods. So that's a really good news story there. One thing we're looking to change after going through a long public comment period, actually 2 of them, we're going to transition to high seas products in meters. We're only doing this over the high seas, or products affecting the high seas. Offshore products, coastal products, Great Lakes products, those are all staying in feet. Don't worry about that. Again, they're staying in feet. But we've had a lot of feedback over the years, particularly from our international partners that traverse the high seas, that really would like to see our forecasts in meters. And oh, by the way, can you get rid of this hodgepodge of products in feet as well as in meters? So some of our charts, most of our charts actually at the Ocean Prediction Center, except for 2, are done in meters, but we still have a couple done in feet. I think Honolulu and TAFB, they're at the Hurricane Center, many of their charts are in feet. It's just been a hodgepodge. And based on the customer feedback that we've gotten, and now getting customer comment back, because about a 2/3 to 1/3 majority saying, hey, go ahead and do this, please do this. We plan to switch that around May 15th to go to meters in the forecast for the high seas. So we think it's going to be a welcome change. Everything will be the same units. You won't have to go back and forth from feet to meters, at least in these forecasts produced by the big marine centers. The other thing I want to mention is that we've had a researcher here that's been working hard on looking at ways to provide out in the week 2 time frame probabilities of significant weather events, such as probabilities of gale force winds, storm force winds, hurricane force winds, and the like. And we're just about ready to open up our experimental webpage, probably sometime in February, so that mariners or just people who are interested can look and see probabilities of these types of events out in the areas, mainly north of 30 North in the warm season. In the cold season, outside the hurricane season, we'll expand that area south of 30 North because we don't want to confuse people with what's being produced by the National Hurricane Center or the CPHC in Hawaii. But we found some good validation with these. They're not perfect, but we just want to be able to give Mariner a sense, really looking out and planning, because sometimes it takes a long time to go across the Atlantic and the Pacific. Just a sense of where the bad stuff might be going down that 7 to 14 day time period. So when you take a look at this when it's opened up, please provide us feedback. We really want to hear from you as how this is working for you or not working for you, and we can make changes accordingly. So with that, I will just want to say thank you for your time, for your attention. You'll note some of the people here on this page that you can reach out to for any questions or comments. My information is there, Darin.Figurskey@NOAA.gov. The warning coordination meteorologist here at the Ocean Prediction Center, Michael Fulmer, is located just to the right of mine. Our outreach focal point, Casey Joseph, is there just below Michael's. Melinda Bailey is the Marine Program Lead for the National Weather Service. She works at our National Weather Service headquarters. And then Chris Lancy is my counterpart at the Tropical Analysis and Forecast branch of the National Hurricane Center. You're going to be hearing from him in a separate presentation real soon. Again, I think it's tomorrow, but his contact information is there. So Brian, I'll stop there, turn it back over to you, and let us take the next maybe 10-ish minutes or so to address any questions that are available from the audience.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Darin. Awesome presentation. I was particularly grimacing at the slide of the vessel that wound up in Ernesto because that's just a horrific situation. But, it's a good example of why we expand our services and why we're really leaning into IDSS. Are there any additional questions for Darin while we're all on the line here?
Yeah, I see you addressed the one getting a copy of the slides. Yep, that'll be great. We'll get a copy of that. We'll get that out to folks. I'll pause again just for a moment. If you don't have any, you can certainly, if you think about some later on, you can certainly email me and we'd be glad to take them. Right now over the Pacific, if I'm going to, since we got just a little bit of time, I'm going to go to our website really quickly. From our National Weather Service webpage at weather.gov, you can certainly click on some areas and you can see some of the warnings that are in place. Gale warnings off the Pacific coast, a little bit off the Atlantic coast. Some coastal, maybe small craft advisories done there. I think that's what those are. You can also click on Alaska, some storm warnings there. If you go to our ocean.weather.gov, you can see right now there is, just clicking on the Pacific itself, developing storm force low that's going to be moving toward the Pacific Northwest. And that one's actually going to deepen pretty soon. So by 24 hours, it should be a storm force low there. And you look out at 96 hours, actually how active the Pacific is going to be with just a series of low pressure systems moving west to east or southwest to northeast over that basin. This time of year, it's really, really active. Freezing spray toward Asia. So again, just a really, really active pattern, not unusual for this time of year. If I go over to the Atlantic very quickly, developing storm force condition with low pressure from eastern Canada headed toward Greenland. Right now it's pretty big high pressure out over there. But if we look at 96 hours, is some big high pressure developing storm over the central part of the Atlantic. 48 hours, gale up over Greenland again, very long front associated with that. Actually some near gale conditions. Kind of off the southeast coast, a little bit off the southeast coast, southwest of Bermuda, and a similar low pressure system farther out in the Atlantic there as well. So all those services are there. If you scroll down, you can get our offshore waters forecast. You can see the alphanumeric products associated with that. The iceberg analysis here, which I point to. Again, just a few right now off the Canadian coast, north of Newfoundland. And then following further along, there's some, some experimental freezing spray guidance that is available for you, not just off the Atlantic coast, but if we go to the Arctic page, clicking on that, we can scroll down and there's some more 24-hour icing experimental products there. We've started to do this. There's been a couple of tragedies, one in particular with the Scandies Rose off the Aleutian 3 years ago. And so while this is experimental, we've continued to provide this service. Usually the National Weather Service doesn't provide experimental products indefinitely. Usually it lasts maybe a year or maybe two. But in this case, work with some of our partners like the National Transportation Safety Board, the Coast Guard. They really want us to continue this for a while. So we are going to do that. And you can find multinational text products. This is the kind of the website I was mentioning from the WMO. So if you're interested in Med Area 5, for example, and want to find out what the high seas products are for Brazil, you can go right to this webpage, actually highlight right from ours. You can get their high seas warnings and forecasts. You'll note that some of the high seas forecasts done around the world are, their formats are a little bit different. Sometimes they may have really, really high level descriptions focused on the Beaufort scale. They might just talk about waves being rough or very rough. We tend to be a little bit more specific, so our forecasts tend to be a little bit longer. Some people like that. Some people think it's a little bit too long. But in the long run, one thing that we're going to do at the National Weather Service is we want to be able to provide, in addition to an alphanumeric product, it'll still be a little bit lengthy, but we want to be able to provide graphics of what our warnings are. So, for example, polygons of our gales and our storm force conditions and our hurricane force conditions and waves, let's say over 4 meters or up to 12 meters or whatever the case may be. We want to be able to provide polygons of that. So for a 21st century mariner, really looking for things in a graphical format, having the ability to be able to look at that stuff, maybe even download it onto an electronic chart display, incorporate right on somebody's ECDIS. That's what we really want to do. And we think, that's where our services can be of, really, great value to the mariner who is traversing the high seas here again in the 21st century. So I'll stop with that again, just to see if there are any other questions. I guess there are none, so I'll pause just for a moment again to see if there are any. All right, and hearing none, again, last call. If you do have anything that you want to ask later on that you forgot, please reach out to one of us here at the email address shown on the screen. We'd be happy to address your question. If we can't address it, we'll find out somebody who can. So Brian, hey, back to you. Thanks a lot for the time and attention. I appreciate everybody's time they spent with me today, me and Brian. Wish everybody, whatever you celebrate during the holiday season, hope it's great for you. Hope that the new year is rung in, great for you and yours. That the rest of 2024 and into 2025 is safe for you, and that all your voyages, wherever you go, is done safely, and with all the best, a lot of fun where you're trying to get some recreation in. So again, Brian, back to you.
Cool. Hey, thanks again, Darin. Yeah, since there aren't any more questions, I guess we'll go ahead and just kind of cut everybody loose early here. Again, thanks everyone for tuning in for this webinar. Again, Chris Lanzi will be giving the Tropical Analysis and Forecast branch of the National Hurricane Center equivalent of this presentation tomorrow afternoon. I believe that's also at 1 p.m. So be on the lookout for that. If you want to go ahead and register for that, please do. It'll be pretty awesome. And with that, we'll go ahead and end this here. Again, echoing what Darin said, I hope everyone has a good rest of your day and an even better rest of the holiday season.